Doc Emrick is a Hall of Famer and former lead play-by-play voice for NBC's NHL coverage. And now I don't know what kind of play-by-play you're doing in retirement. Are you doing any play-by-play in retirement, Doc?
Only describing dog walks and occasional visits to the grocery store. That's pretty much it.
Give me a little bit of that.
There's milk. It expires on the 28th of May. There's the 1st of June. I'm going to take the 1st of June because it'll last longer.
Okay. All right. So if you're watching hockey, you're not doing play-by-play at
No,
home?
no, but I'm sure enjoying it. My goodness, is it great. We've had some wonderful games to finish up the last round, and it's just spectacular. And I guess I've grown spoiled. This is what we get every time at this year. It's why Charles Barkley always talks about sneaking behind the set when he's doing basketball and watching hockey. It's just engrossing. It's wonderful, and it's what the sport is all about.
But do you get jealous when you look at these incredible finishes and like you wish you were doing it?
No, I haven't regretted retirement once. I marvel at what the guys do that are describing games now, but the sport is so wonderful. I'm glad I had my years at it, 47 in total, but I don't regret retiring. The thing, when I was riding buses in the minors, the one thing that I looked forward to was the planes and the big hotels. And by the time the 47 years was up and we were in COVID, the thing that I didn't particularly like were the planes and the hotels. I had my time and it was wonderful. I have so many great memories. I met a lot of wonderful people, including yourself. And I'll never forget the day that I was with you and the Danettes. McLovin was in goal, and I think it was Fritzy who shot on him. He had a broom, I believe. Somewhere in the archives there is tape of that, but those are memories that I have that I'll always cherish.
How do you come to the point where you go, now I'm going to retire? Because we see this with athletes. I'm going to retire from this job in 3 years, but you came to that decision. How did you come to that?
Well, in anything where you have a motor skill, which is in athletics as well, you like to make your move before somebody makes it for you. And fortunately, with NBC, the hook was not out. But I had 50 years covering the sport, and I'd had 40 years at the NHL. And I think one thing, too, that COVID did was just before we took the break in February of 2020, the league came out with rules that were very necessary, where we couldn't have anyone between the benches, where we had to be 6 feet with a boom mic away from all the coaches and the players. We could not go into the dressing rooms anymore. And that was where the fun was for me, in addition to preparing and doing the games, was actually being able to learn something more about the players that I could share with somebody. And so all of those things sort of came to the fore at once. The numbers of 40 and 50 were kind of round numbers that were even, and it seemed like a good time. I had so many great memories that it was a great time to be out.
I was going to ask you, what's the first thing to go on a play-by-play person? And it sounds like your eyesight was the first thing to go.
Yeah, I think that would be probably true. You and I were together in London at the Olympics in 2012. And the one thing that happened there was that I discovered, to my chagrin, when I was doing water polo, that I had cataracts. And so those were removed, and my eyesight, of course, immediately got better. But you realize that those are things that happen with age. But I don't know that my eyesight was going, but you realize that that does happen as you get older. But I think the thing with me was that the travel was starting to get to me, and I wanted to be home more. And all of those things added up to make for the right decision. And to get to watch these games now, and especially the finishes that we had in the game sevens, um, were, the come from behind third periods in the game sevens, as well as the come from behind almost tie last night in Toronto. Those are exciting, and I do envy the guys that are doing the games now, but I wouldn't want to be there. They are having the time of their lives doing these games, and I'm glad for them.
Talking to Doc Emrick, member of the NHL and Sports Broadcasting Hall of Fame. If I would have talked to you 20 years ago and I would have said to you, Gretzky's goal scoring record is not safe, you would have said what?
You're wrong. I would have said, yeah, I would have said I agree with you that it's. I would have said it's safe. But then we had Wayne Gretzky on at the All-Star game in St. Louis 5 years ago, and he was asked the question, "Can Ovechkin catch you?" And he said yes, and here's why: he's on a good team that wins a lot of games, and he's healthy. He rarely gets hurt. This year he did, but to his credit, he came back a bulldozer, and he wound up eclipsing the record in a marvelous ceremony that the NHL had on Long Island. But the other thing is, too, the one thing that is often overlooked, he came into the league a bull in a china shop, and he would hammer players. He was often the league leader in hits, and he was again this year. He never stopped playing his game, and yet he was the greatest goal scorer of the modern era, and now is the record goal scorer of all time. And a guy that came in, I'll never forget the first time that we ever had him on our telecast in New Jersey. Of course, we wanted to interview Alex Ovechkin. And so he came in and politely sat down, and we had a technical difficulty on MSG Network. And we said, Alex, we're sorry, we can't do the interview. He said, no, you don't understand. I want to do the interview. And we told him, no, we can't. We've got a technical problem in the truck. We can't do it. And so he got up and left. But he really wanted to do everything the right way when he first came here.
If I said you can start your team with Ovechkin or Crosby?
I want them both because I want the playmaker and I want the goal scorer.
It doesn't work that way, Doc.
Okay, Crosby. And here's why. Because you do need goal scorers. I understand that. But Sid is the guy who is always going to be prepared to play first on, last off, is always going to be a playmaker and a guy that will lead by example. And that's not to say that Alex as captain does not. We saw what he did with Marc-Andre Fleury, and they were arch rivals, of course, for a long time. He has led by example, too. But here's a story that showed what Alex has grown into, and it would make that on the total of years, Sid has done this in Pittsburgh, but Alex has picked up that slack in the later years in Washington. I was talking with Barry Trotz before what turned out to be the last game that Washington would play before they won the Stanley Cup championship. And I said, can you retell a story that you told me earlier in the year about Ovechkin? And so he did. And so I did tell this at the end of the playoffs when Washington was winning the Stanley Cup. It was that summer before, and the Capitals had disappointed again. And Alex was getting married, and Barry was invited. And so he went over to Moscow and attended the wedding. He was invited to the reception, and Barry said, I'm not going to go to the reception with a bunch of my hockey players. I'll wait. So he had dinner with Alex shortly thereafter. And he said, Alex, I've got to talk to you seriously about what's coming ahead. There is a lot of unhappiness in Washington. And there are people who think it's your fault. And there are people who think that it's the fault of some of your teammates. And there is going to be change. You are going to have to train like you never trained before. You are going to have to be the first guy on the ice, and you are going to have to be this team's leader. It's not pleasant to think about, but that's what's ahead. That fall, he came in and scored 7 goals in the first 2 games. And even though Washington fell behind in their playoff series, they were rallied and went ahead, and they went on and won the Stanley Cup. And he's been the great leader ever since. But Sid has been doing that ever since he came to Pittsburgh. And so when you force me into that corner and the paint is still not dried, I choose Sid.
What is it like when you know the game can end at any moment, when you get into sudden death overtime? So as a play-by-play guy, what is your game plan of how to call it so you're on time with it or a little bit ahead of the play as opposed to kind of cleaning up after that?
Yeah, you have to be right on it. And with that, and the referees tell me the same thing. With that, you have to be on it. But boy, you got to be right. And you also have to be in control of your emotions so that you don't overdo it. This is about the players. It is not about yourself. It's not about signature calls or anything else. By the way, I'll sidestep this for a minute. I need to pay tribute to the referees who handled Game 7 because those games were thrilling because of them. They didn't want to be them in the way. They didn't have a steady parade to the penalty box because they were there on merit. They didn't leave that behind, and they were nervous too, I'll bet. And you get nervous before an overtime in a Stanley Cup Game 7. I've had some of those, but yeah, you need to be on top of it. You need to be right. And as I heard Larry Colmus, the caller of the Kentucky Derby, interviewed, you can't have an eraser on your tongue. You can't take it back. And so all of those things go into making this kind of work exciting. And I always encourage young people who are interested in it to get into it and stay into it because it is certainly rewarding and a great way to make a living. By the way, those names are Wes McCauley, Dan O'Rourke, Jean Hebert, and Gord Dwyer. Those are the 4 guys in stripes that handled those games.
What hockey name gave you fits?
Sergei Nemchinov, and it sure shouldn't have. I was working with Bill Clement, and we were doing, and I kept saying Nemchinov with an M. And he said, say Nemnov, Nemnov, Nemnov. You can do it, can't you? And I said, yeah, I can. And it came down to where if I said that over and over again before the game, that it came out more right than wrong. But it's an imperfect science, isn't it? I mean, you guys have to talk 3 hours in the morning, and it's not totally perfect, I suppose. But I never did a perfect game. I mean, you talk over and over all the time, and you do make mistakes, that's for sure.
We don't care about getting it right, though, Doc. That's the difference between us and you.
But you do. Yeah. Am I looking at the team that's going to be on Celebrity Family Feud? Is this the 5?
Yeah.
Okay, you've chosen
them. Yeah. For better or for worse, yes. That's my. Any advice on Celebrity Family Feud?
No, I think you should rely on your experience, and that's my stat of the day.
Oh.
The number is 89. The experience that your team has going in, I think, will lead you to victory. You have 26 years. In June, Fritzy will have 23. Paulie has 18. Seton has 16 and Marvin has 6. That's a total of 89. You rely on your experience, and I agree with what you said last week. You're there to entertain. I mean, it'd be nice if you could win, but the memory will come from entertaining. And in gut versus analytics, the coach that I would favor is you, because I think you're going to go on gut and not analytics.
Yeah. Okay.
You guys were talking last week about Giannis and his poor free throw percentage.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, I watched Wilt Chamberlain, and he was terrible at the foul line. I looked it up; he was 51%, and I think you guys said that's about where Giannis was last week.
Well,
So
yeah, and somebody, I'm sure they've tried, but it should be fluid. He doesn't
yeah,
have a fluid free throw. It stops. It's almost like a ladder unfolding, and that you got to make it start from your legs and go all the way up and follow through. You know, being a great free throw shooter that you are.
well, it's a new decade. So if I get to New York, it's best of three, and we will try it yet again. I like that left-hand hook shot that I see every so often. Is that like the Kareem sky hook?
That's Fritzy.
Ah, okay. I thought it was you.
No. And I'll shoot blindfolded if you want to.
Okay.
Yes.
As long as it's best of three, because we've been postponing this now largely because of my logistics. But those are.
You're retired. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no more excuses.
You're right.
Right?
You're absolutely right.
Okay. All right. You're welcomed in my dojo anytime you want to, Doc. Okay.
Terrific.
All right. Great to catch up with you again. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
That's the Hall of Famer, Doc Emrick.